CCL work. If we could go to the next slide. We also are working to align our work. So we've seen this slide quite a bit. Pockets of excellence are definitely happening in ASD. We are starting to get within our district into that section of impact with alignment, where all the arrows are pointing to the right direction, which is our board goals. And the collective impact in this case for CCL would be our community is also aligned with us in the work. And so we're all headed to that specific goal of college, career, and life ready. Next slide. So just a reminder that our goal is to work on developing career academies for our students at the high school level. So what that means is expanding our CTE course offerings and our work-based learning. We want it to be inclusive and equitable for all of our students, not just some of our students. That's that pocket of excellence that we have now. Not every kid is exposed to what they could be exposed to. We really want to focus on smaller learning environments for students so that there's more connection with individual students. We really want this to be a community transformation, not just a standalone district initiative. And so that's part of the work that we've really been establishing in the few short months over the summer. Looking at an academy structure, just a reminder that it's those 4 core subjects that you traditionally think about, plus the CTE course included in that academy. So when you're thinking about students taking courses in the future, they would take science, social studies, language arts, and math, and then a 5th core course of CTE, which is that career pathway of their choice. Academy structures will include some common planning time for teachers. We will also schedule students into the cohort of the academy. Scheduling is very intentional, following a career pathway for a student, and having business and civic engagement within the classroom or getting our kids out into the community is the goal. So as students approach high school, Freshman Academy is our first goal for them. So Freshman Academy is going to develop that base, and then through the process and experience of Freshman Academy, students would then pick their career academy of choice. And so that's where we're headed. If you go to the next slide, you'll be reminded of our timeline where we've been. The initial district assessment happened in the spring of 22. We spent a lot of time really structuring things and planning things last year. This is like, let's get it done year. That's the 23-24 school year. So there's going to be a lot of happenings. And our goal is to launch all of our freshman academies at the Big 8 high schools this time next fall, followed by those students moving up to their sophomore year, a launch of all of the career academies. So I just wanted to kind of ground us in that reminder of the work, and before we kind of update you on all of the different things that are happening. So the first update is around partnerships. We've had a lot of progress in this realm. I'm happy to announce United Way as what we call our community convening organization. The purpose of this convening organization is to be kind of like our right-hand person through the work. So they are advocating actively around the career academy work in the community, just as we are structuring it for the district, and we're working hand in hand through the work. So they will help us solicit folks to be involved in the work. They will help us with the collaboration between schools and the community. They will even help us with potential fundraising in the future and developing those assets that we could access. And then they're also just going to be very big advocates for the work as well. One of the things that they will do as a part of the partnership is hire what we call a community coordinator. That's a point person that they pay for on their side of the house. Their sole purpose is to coordinate the work with us around the Career Academy work. So we're really excited that United Way wants to partner with us. They believe in the work, and it aligns nicely to their initiatives as well. And I'm excited to move forward with them. Looking at the next slide, we've established some other partnerships as well. We've talked about Anchorage Economic Development Corporation as a partner. They're one of our main partners. The Chamber for Anchorage is also a main partner for us. United Way was mentioned, and then UAA as well. So they all serve a distinct role in the partnership work, and they will be a part of what we call the operating board, which is part of the governance structure. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we have United Way and Anchorage School District as the two main players working hand in hand through this work. The operating board is that high-level leadership where AEDC, UAA, and others will sit. And then there's smaller groups such as tactical teams, which are like our work groups. The co-chairs of those tactical teams are going to be sitting on the steering committee, and the operating committee is the leadership group of that steering committee. And that's how we will get the work done through a governance structure as we move along. So tactical teams are doing the really intricate, detailed work. Those co-chairs are reporting up to the steering committee and the operating board so that we can really have the lower level work with the details, but then that high level picture of the operating board so we can keep our eye on the main goal. So we're starting to build all of that governance structure out, and the operating board will meet monthly this year to kind of guide us through this transformation process. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy. I'm going to turn it over to Larissa to talk about Academy Coach onboarding.
So it's my privilege as the CCL coordinator to really work with all 8 of these academy coaches. They're all coming to their high schools from within the district, but from a huge variety of roles within ASD. And they have this really dynamic way of blending criticality and positivity that has been a lot of fun to work with. So they are our link between business and each of their individual high schools. So right now they are doing that work of learning all of the things that we've worked on and accomplished over the last 2 years with the CCL board goal, including the coaching work that we've had established with Ford Next Generation Learning. They are creating inventories for each of their buildings from what is physically located there to the kinds of things that the staff know and are connected to in the community. They are expanding on that with ongoing interviews with all of the stakeholders within their buildings and from outside of their buildings as well, including parents and existing school business partners. And then they will pick up a lot of the outstanding work that CTE has been shouldering on their own and continue to expand on all of that from their buildings perspective in order to support that transformation more explicitly.
All right, thanks, Larissa. Next, we want to talk about community outreach. This has been a huge part of the summer work, and Cindy's going to talk about that.
Hi, everyone. How can this not be the most exciting part of my job? About how together we can support kids and support our community and our workforce. It's been quite amazing. Overall, the outreach that I've had from the community has been nothing but positive. I wanted to start with that. And internally as well, we're having some great conversations. So if we go to the next slide, I'll give you a preview. It didn't show up. It didn't show up. You can just talk. Okay, so I'll talk about it. There is multiple. We have probably done 30 to 40 different presentations across all of Anchorage, and we've been really specific and strategic on that approach. We have spoke with numerous industry associations from all different career clusters. We've been to the Alaska Truck Association. We've been to Alaska Primary Care Associates, RDC, the Building Trades Council. We've also had an opportunity to see many post-secondary training and training facilities within the Anchorage Bowl area, from UAA to APU to Alaska Works, and all the training centers that we could within the union trades. We've also spoke with the military, JBEAR, not only active, but also civilian posts there. We've been meeting with cultural and community groups, from the Alaska Polynesian Association to CITC to ANCSA. We've also been talking with Rotaries. And finally, since school started, we have begun more conversation internally, speaking with our leadership groups within our high schools. So overall, we have been busy through August. We are continuing to September to also reach additional groups before the convening.
All right, thanks, Cindy. Thank you. So Cindy and I have been out to a number of meetings together, and we continue to outreach to additional organizations over time. So we're not done with the community outreach. And I would just invite the board, if there's certain groups that you know that you would like us to reach out to as a part of this work, please let us know. We're happy to go out and meet with whomever wants to learn more about our work, so that they can be a part of it. The other big piece of the work that we have been working on over the summer is growing our partnerships with our community partners that were already established, and streamlining our process. So I'll turn it over to Devin to talk a little bit more about that.
So the growing work-based learning is something that we've been working on. One of the things that we currently have in the district is we have a number of CT programs, both at middle school and at the high schools. And we're looking at expanding that current footprint. And we contracted with Ford NGL to do some work called Powerful Partnerships over the course of a little over the last year or so, year and a half. And that's culminating with an expansion in terms of working with more business partners, and to deepen the work that we're doing with those partners. One of the other things that we're working on is getting a better handle on a more granular data in terms of our students and the work-based learning opportunities that they are engaging in. That's going to be sort of a two-pronged approach. One is that we're taking a look at our student information system, Q, and we're making some modifications in order to track work-based learning on a per student basis, as well as we're looking at other outside platforms. For instance, Seamless WBL is a platform that allows for some really robust tracking of work-based learning and doing some advisory board management, which is all a part of this work. And then finally, we're also looking to try and deepen the work that teachers are doing on the work-based learning continuum. So in addition to doing some of this stuff that's a little bit less intensive, I think if you go to the next slide, you can see I'll talk about that here in just a minute. But the expanding, in terms of expanding powerful partnerships, one of the things that is involved is continuing to develop these relationships. And as Larissa mentioned, the academy coaches are going to, in the future, be helping the CT department reach out to business partners and do more of that networking in order to bring them on board. But part of the work is also in order to create a structure and protocols to make sure that businesses are taken care of, that they're welcomed. They're welcomed in the building. They're welcomed in the buildings, and that there's a support scaffolds put in place in order to create action plans that really will develop deeper work-based learning that's happening and that will happen in the classrooms. And that means having industry partners both come into the school as well as to get students out into those work sites, like Dr. Johnson mentioned earlier. So that's some of what's happening. If we go to the next slide. One of the eventual goals is to create this partnership process. Dr. Johnson mentioned the partnership coordinator, that position that we're working with United Way of Anchorage in order to get is going to be an integral part of the partnership process. That generally referrals from prospective business and industry partners and those from the nonprofit sector as well will go through that partnership coordinator and work through this process and eventually be sort of handed off to an academy coach at a specific building associated with a variety of those career academies, and to partner them with teachers and teams in order to enrich the learning going on at those schools through that work-based learning approach. And next slide. This is just the work-based learning continuum I mentioned earlier. We have currently a decent amount of classroom speakers and CT programs and roundtable discussions. We have some interesting things like mock interviews and resume preparation sessions, coaching that's happening. We also have a pretty robust CT internship program, but all of that will need to expand and deepen as this work progresses and we start to see more CTE program at the 8 comprehensive high schools.
All right. Essentially, what we're trying to do is build our bench before those career academies launch, which is part of the work-based learning plan that Devin's talking about. Because if you can imagine now, we have pockets of those things happening in our schools. But if you think about all 8 of our high schools and how many students are in those high schools, it will have to expand by quite a bit. And so as we lead up into that launch of career academies in the fall of 2025, our goal is to have that bench ready. And part of that is really taking care of businesses and kind of shepherding those relationships so that the word spreads that it's a fun thing to do. We want to be engaged, and then we have more and more folks that are wanting to help us with our students. The other part of our work that is just getting started, but will continue indefinitely until we are ready to really launch, is our tactic teams. And the tactic teams are essentially where the rubber hits the road. It's where our community and our school-based people and our district-based folks can get together to really do the intricate planning work. And so I'm going to have Cindy talk a little bit more about those.
Awesome. Thank you. As Kirsten said, these are our work groups that really focus on different various aspects of our academy operation. And we will be standing up tactic teams in the near future. This is work that needs to be done right away in order to make sure that the academy's model is able to, we can implement it in a timely manner. Some of the tactic teams that we are currently working on and have developed is our communications team is up and running. We also have a health and wellness advisory board that is up and running. We are currently launching the Freshman Academy tactic team, and they will be developing a proposal for what items are needed to make sure that all of our students have a successful transition into high school, interdisciplinary teaming, career exploration, as well as an introduction to what the academy model is. Other tactic teams, transportation, middle school, career exploration is another one that we will be uplifting in the near future. Overall, we will be developing an equity tactic team that will look at each of the works of each of the individual tactic teams to make sure that we are addressing all these tactic teams through a cultural lens.
All right, thanks, Cindy. A couple other points about the tactic team. They have co-chairs, and I think this is important as we look at a community-based transformation and approach to this work. One co-chair will be ASD based, and then another co-chair will be from our community, business, or industry, so that we have both perspectives at the table when we're planning this work as we go along. And so we've already secured some community partners to do tactic team co-chair work. As we work through the community convening and that work down the road here this school year, we will continue to launch tactic teams and solicit help from our community on those tactic teams. And so you'll see more and more of that develop over the course of the year. Switching gears a little bit, I'd like to turn it over to Devin to talk about grants. Grants and writing grants is one of our big approaches to trying to jumpstart this work. So I'll have him explain the work that we've done around grants.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've noticed is that one of the things that's occurred to us is that we're going to have to lean into a grant strategy known as braiding funding sources. So we're going to need to look at and align a variety of different sources and braiding, like braiding hair, braiding funding sources. Yeah. So we currently will likely need to, with an initiative this size, look at external grants, which I'll talk about more in just a minute and highlight. But in addition to that, current funding, title funds, other sources, outside agencies. Dr. Johnson mentioned, fundraising by our convener, United Way of Anchorage. And so, but purposefully utilizing grant funds, leveraging our existing data in order to ensure that we get, we can get some grant funding. And part of that will likely involve us aligning our various funding stream requirements and aligning some of our priorities. So on a sort of a holistic scale, making sure that we're using all the resources possibly that we can in an efficient means to get the transformation to happen. The two grants that we've looked at, if you can go to the next slide, the two grants that one has been submitted. The one on the left column is the Fostering Diverse Schools grant. Both of these grants are the funding source is the U.S. Department of Education. The one on the left, Fostering Diverse School Grants, is approximately a $15 million grant. The focus for it is to primarily stand up freshman academy and career academies. And what that means specifically is putting in place some additional staffing that might be required. There's a tremendous amount of professional development, as I'm sure you can imagine. Looking at student, individual, career, and learning planning platforms and supplies. We'd like to, one of the parts of the grant that I think is really exciting is the guarantee. The one on the right is one that's currently under development. So we're currently working on writing this one. This is the Perkins Modernization Innovation Grant. Because they have the same funding source, we can't ask for the same things under that funding source. And so one of the pieces that we're really excited about is increasing our dual and concurrent enrollment programs throughout the district, which is a bit of a heavy lift. And so that is where the focus is currently with that grant. It's under development, should be finished and submitted within a few weeks.
All right. Thank you, Devin. So the next topic I'm excited to talk about, and I'm sure you have questions about, is the community convening in October on the 12th. Those invitations just went out today. So you should, if you haven't seen them yet, you should have it in your inbox. We are inviting 200 or 300 of our community friends to join us. So we are aiming for 2/3 of the room to be from our community and about 1/3 of our room to be ASD stakeholders in a variety of roles. We truly want this to be unbalanced on the community participant side so that we get a really good perspective from our community about what they would like to see in our graduates. So if you go to the next slide, the purpose of our convening is really to collectively as a whole develop a vision for the CCL work. I think we have a good direction, but part of that vision is developing what we call a profile of a graduate. And I know we've talked about that before when we've talked about CCL work. The board did start some of this conversation as a part of the strategic planning process in 2019, if you recall, and that was part of the development of the CCL goal and overall strategic plan for the district that we have now. So this is essentially an extension of that conversation, and we will seek to have our own profile of a graduate, and I'll show you a couple of examples in a minute. We also will spend some time, not necessarily specifically on October 12th, but at a follow-up event, really starting to select our career academies. It's kind of a two-part event. But we will be looking on the 12th at some of our workforce data to start to chew on a little bit as a community, so everyone is really well aware of why we're doing the work, the reason behind the work, and having a collective vision for the work. Because if we're in opposite kind of corners of the room as a community, we're not going to be working together, going down the right path, right? So we really need to spend some time as a community establishing that vision and then moving forward as we start to select those academies over the course of the next few months. So if you go to the next slide, this is one example I've shown before from Akron, Ohio. This is their portrait of a graduate. It's fairly simple, and it can be different. So if you go to the next slide, this is another example from Hampton, Virginia, which is much more detailed. And so part of our work will be deciding as a community, what do we want ours to look like? Do we want it to be very intricate like this example, or do we want a more simplified version? And that acts as essentially the the beacon for the work, like the North Star of CCL work. So all of our career academies, when they're designed, will use the profile of a graduate as kind of their North Star, and looking at those skills that they want students to have as a profile of a graduate and as a graduate, those will all be incorporated into the career academies. So that's why developing that profile is important first before we dive right into the career academy selection. So I'm excited for that work. We have a lot planned that day, and there's a lot of interest. So I think it'll be a really great day, and we'll get a lot done as we move forward. So we can move on to the next slide. Any questions before we move to our preview of board monitoring?
Excuse me, for the record, Member Higgins joined us about 4:03. Can you, so I struggle with the term governance, and it's not pertaining to the board.
Sure.
So help me understand why this work is not advisory to the board, as opposed to the other thing I'm feeling.
Sure. Yeah. We wouldn't be that governance. I think it's the word governance probably. It's basically like our guiding committee. Everything that we do would be under the purview of the board. So we're not going to make decisions for the board. If there are specific things that need to be decided by the board, we would work through those and then we would bring them to the board for that consideration. It's really just our organizational structure of how we're going to get the work done.
Okay, so the word advisory would not be a better word than governance.
We can definitely change it.
Yeah, and I think just to chime in, the way that I look at it is the governance board, or whatever we call it, really is advisory to the superintendent in the implementation. But of course, only the board owns the governance of how we execute our goals. So I do agree the word could be a little confusing. I think it's a word commonly used by Ford NGL, so it wasn't intentionally used to confuse.
Okay, I just kind of want to be clear on that. And that makes sense. Because the work is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against the work.
Sure.
I just don't want there to be any, we are not relinquishing our authority as a board in order to embrace the work.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Member Higgins, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. How are we doing as far as monitoring the effectiveness of programs like this? I mean, the follow-up of where kids are going, what's going on. To me, everything else is, it's guesswork if you want to, or it's studies with other groups. But how are we evaluating what's working or what isn't?
So we have some of our graduation data that shows that students that participate in our CTE completers is what we call them, which is essentially more than one CTE course in line with a certain pathway or industry. So we have data showing that those students are more likely to graduate than students that don't participate in those experiences. That's how we kind of got to this work to begin with. There's also national clearinghouse data we can track of our graduates essentially when they go to post-secondary training. So we're able to collect that data post-graduation and see how our graduates are doing in either college or whatever the post-secondary training is that they're a part of. But part of the tactic team planning that is just getting started will be looking at program evaluation. That's actually one of the tactic teams will stand up, is how are we measuring the progress of our kids, what's effective, what's not. The other part to that, not to be too long-winded, is that when we get to the end of this year, we will be finalizing a 3-year master plan around the Career Academy's work. Part of the review of that 3-year plan will be an annual look at how our academies are doing and how they're functioning. So we'll have an annual review of that master plan to see if adjustments need to be made.
As we struggle with staffing, which we're doing that obviously, and the teachers as well, what's the feedback from teachers on doing different things and expanding and all the other issues? Seems to be a complex one. And you get feedback, we do, from different people, positives, negatives, and the like. What is there any issues there that we need to know from your perspective of the feedback that is a concern or an issue?
I think that that's part of the grant writing strategy, is the funding piece. We also will look at the way we organize our schools and the courses that are offered, realigning those to the mission of CCL. So there will be a lot of internal reorganization to point all of our resources to that college career life ready goal. That likely will mean some courses that don't follow a career pathway or don't fit into our new system will probably be sunsetted, while other opportunities will be born because of the Career Academy model. And so we will try to be efficient about what we have internally, but we'll also be looking, like I said, at grant funding and things of that nature to help us boost this system along.
And that's one point. Well, you for something?
Oh, yeah, sure.
How?
Real quick.
Just one more, and we'll go ahead.
Did you have a follow-up?
Just one follow-up, and that is funding is an issue, of course. Mm-hmm. And what are we missing right now? If we had more funds, I mean, we've got limited from the state, we've got all the other issues. What is it that the state, by providing more funds, would contribute to helping us do things that are not on this list that we would add? Is there things here that we should know about?
Well, I think that teachers in the area of CTE are going to be a need for our future. If you think about the offerings we have now and then expanding that to every student in the high schools, there's going to be a need for recruiting CTE teachers. That can be a recruiting issue. It can also be just a certification issue and a training issue. So obviously, funding for that is missing in this equation. That's part of the grant that we wrote. A lot of the needs are going to be identified through the course of the school year, in terms of need for the structure that we're building. So if you think about the career academies, we could dictate every little thing that probably wouldn't go so well in our community or in our district. So this really is a district-wide, community-wide collaborative project that'll start to identify those needs, and we can start to bring those forward as they come.
Thank you. Member Wilson.
Can you talk just a little bit briefly about the collaborative work being done with CTE, our Career Technology Education Program, as well as our School Business Partnership Program?
Sure. So I might have Devin chime in a little bit here too, but essentially CTE is still a department. CCL is going to, we're essentially like brothers and sisters together and as one family, if that makes sense. So like Devin, Cindy and I's office, they're all right next to each other. Larissa's right down the hallway from some of the other CTE staff members. We're essentially operating in unison, although CTE is much more focused on the CTE curriculum piece and also the work-based learning building, while we're working on building the structures of the academies. But they really do go hand in hand as a partnership in terms of the two entities in the district. And I think I only answered part of your question. I forget the second part.
The other was the School Business Partnership Program.
Oh, yeah. So we've been working very closely with Colette at School Business Partnerships and her board. Cindy is actually a board member now on the School Business Partnership Board. So we fully expect to work hand in hand with them throughout the work. They are also one of our links to the chamber. So when we start looking at things like career expos as an experience for students, and we really want businesses to be a part of that they'll be vital in that role. School business partners will still also be really vital in the partnerships at the elementary level as well. So they have a multifaceted role throughout the CCL work. So anything you want to add, Devin? Yeah.
Member Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the information thus far. Looking at the timeline that was earlier in the slide deck, we're talking about launching the Academy fall of 24, which involves at least a freshman seminar class. So I'm tying that together with the grant information that was shared, indicating that we're hoping for some additional staffing resources from those grant awards potentially. So between now and next fall, essentially, we're hoping to receive funds train staff and onboard staff to get at least the freshman seminar rolled out?
We are. So there's that. We also have some of our own allocated general funds that the board has already approved to use for this purpose. So it's going to be a combination. So I don't want to give the impression that if we don't get the grant, we're not going to be able to get the work done. There are funds available to get the work done. We could probably do a lot faster with the grants, if that makes sense. But we do intend to keep this timeline regardless of receiving the grants.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And let the record show Member Holloman has joined us. Member Lessons.
I may be getting ahead of myself or ahead of you all. I think there's a lot of really exciting work being done. I love that we're starting by inventorying our assets. There are so many of them within ASD and within the community itself, and I think that's really important. As I think ahead, though, to the different CTE programs at the different high schools, how are we going to ensure that students are able to engage with the program that maybe they are most passionate about or interested in, and perhaps is not located at the school next door to them?
Yeah.
So how are we going to make that happen?
Sure. Great question. So that's one of the reasons, one of the tactic teams is around transportation. We need to look at creative solutions for that. When we've done our research for communities that have done this work prior to us, about 90 to 95% of the students typically stay at their home high school, even though there may be an academy across town that they want to go to, because our kids are connected to their home school typically. But that transportation tactic team would be the place where we would problem solve some of those things. We've seen districts buy vans to transport kids. We've seen muni bus schedules coordinated with school districts, things of that nature. And those are all of those types of questions that transportation team would work on, along with the equity tactic team as well.
Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I feel like I've recently read that there are more grants for things like electric buses, right? If we needed to have a transportation team, help problem solve this, perhaps a grant providing additional busing opportunities could be a part of that solution.
Yeah.
And infrastructure is a really great use of grants, because then you don't need to backfill it once a grant expires.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And braiding funding is another part that we used that term earlier when we were talking about the grants, but essentially it's just blended funding between departments. So we can look at funds around CITC, or not CITC, CIT, students, children in transition, and things of that nature. That's both internal, but we can also look external for creative solutions.
So just a real quick question, because we got still one more presentation. Yep. Sorry, Eric. So who's on the tactic team?
So
is that the 8 people that you've already identified, or is that community?
There will be community for sure, involved on all of the tactic teams. Each tactic team is going to have a different makeup depending on the topic. So, the equity tactic team is going to have a different makeup than our freshman academy tactic team. And so when we are going, as we did with Eric, earlier, or actually last week, we've created a kind of a system of how we are going to do business with our tactic teams in terms of recording the work, who the members are, and that way we have great documentation of the work that we're doing. And for the tactic team of Freshman Academy, as an example, we are going to use our academy coaches from all 8 of our high schools as a ready resource. We're going to have principals as a part of that tactic team. We're going to have a counselor as a part of that tactic team. We are going to have different community members a part of that tactic team, potentially some student input eventually as well. And so that will look very different than like a transportation tactic team where you need, very expertise, like a lot of expertise in the area of transportation to plan, if that makes sense. So it will vary tactic team to tactic team.
Okay. I think in the back of my brain is this flag that tells us that we are as a state and nationally in a teacher shortage. Have we factored, and I don't know if you factored that into the plans, the goals. So the 8 academy coaches that you are onboarding, are they out of classes, not teaching and working only on this program?
They are this year. And part of it is because there's so much planning work. Larissa talked about them being the conduit between business and the school. They're also the conduit between the district work and the building level work. So like I'll use Freshman Academy as an example. We'll have our district-wide Freshman Academy that sets the high level expectations for what Freshman Academy needs to include. But West High School and East High School are going to have a different flavor based on their school personality, their traditions, and that sort of thing, and what their kids need at each of those schools. So there will be some must-haves as a part of Freshman Academy district-wide, and then schools will get to personalize it as well. So that's where we need academy coaches to know what the district level work is and be able to really do that planning work at the building level too and have that connection, if that makes sense.
And I'll follow up with you. I want to kind of thank you.
Yeah.
Get to our next chunk.
Sure.
Of the presentation.
Yep.
Thank you, President Bellamy, members of the board. Yes, so during his introductory remarks, Dr. Bryant mentioned that part of this evening's presentation includes a recommended revision to the CCL board goal. And I want you to know that we've worked really hard on that for quite some time. The secondary division, teaching and learning, assessment and evaluation in the superintendent's office, all of us together have worked hard on this. Member Higgins earlier mentioned accountability. How are we going to measure this? And there are a lot of CCL specific metrics that can be considered and will be considered. This particular board goal is based on significant meta research, which finds that some of those metrics common to all students, graduation rate, GPA, and attendance, are probably our most reliable metrics in terms of measuring college and career and life ready. So we proposed the revision to you based on that research. So I presented a slide which includes the original goal as it was written some time ago, long before my tenure in this role, along with the proposed recommended rewrite. So the rewrite, the 4-year graduation rate will increase from 81% in spring 2023. That's where things currently stand, to 90% in spring 2028. The percentage of seniors who graduate college and/or career ready will increase from 80% in spring 2023 to 90% in spring 2028, as measured by cumulative grade point average, GPA, and/or attendance. So I'd like to provide some context for the recommended revision. First and foremost, the timeline is consistent with the implementation of CCL as it now stands. The original board goal, I think, was written with some guesswork in mind, and now we have a roadmap. The Freshman Academy, as we've established tonight, will be launched next year. The first graduating class will be 2028. So we've set a 5-year goal for this board goal. Also, I would say 5 years is typical of an ambitious district-wide transformation of the sort we're talking about. It would be difficult to imagine us reaching 90% in a year or two with implementation taking 4 years. As I mentioned earlier, the metrics are important because they apply to all students. It's an important nod toward equity. Unlike previous measures, which may have pointed out SAT scores or taking an AP class or Algebra 2, for example, typical of college career life ready, GPA, attendance, graduation rate apply to everyone. therefore we as a district are held accountable for everyone. I think that's really important, which isn't to say we're not going to measure those other things either. The revision allows for very clear, very accurate, timely data gathering and reporting. And we've worked very hard, as I said, with assessment and evaluation to make sure the data sets we're relying on we can access readily. So graduation rate, of course, is calculated by the district. 81% is based on our best calculation. We await DEED's final official proclamation of graduation rate, which will come in about a month, I think. So we get that from the state. In terms of GPA and attendance, we can access that in a very timely way, and we've just built the tool that can manage that information right when students graduate at the end of their senior year. Also, as I mentioned, the research is based on multiple sources, including, and I've referenced it in a link that you'll all have access to, but Johns Hopkins School of Education, the National Association of School Superintendents, and also the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research, which is widely respected team of researchers. Next slide. Just to point out what might be obvious already, we're using graduation rate as the life readiness metric. And just consider what graduation means. It's the culmination of 12 years of school. If we're looking at high school alone, that's 24 classes at a minimum, all those teachers, all that content, all those activities, all that interaction. There's probably no better metric to measure life readiness than graduation rate itself. We're using attendance, 90% or above, to measure career readiness. It involves grit, accountability, the importance of showing up on time and doing the work. It's a great metric for career readiness. And of course, college readiness measured by grade point average. The research shows us that it should be at a minimum 2.7 in high school. Some say 2.8 or above. And it's the combination of all those things, of course, that we're hoping to produce students who can access a variety of opportunities upon graduation. I wanted to make everyone aware of the current metrics. Again, 81% is our graduation rate. And then we've found through a lot of work, Carolyn Tix should get a shout out in the Office of Assessment and Evaluation, that 80% of our kids are either college and or career ready if we're using these metrics. Interesting to note, 46% of our graduates last year are both meeting the GPA metric and the attendance metric. So almost half of our kids at this point meeting both of those. Next slide. The research tells us that GPA and attendance are the key metrics that predict CCL readiness. The research, as I said, recommends target high school GPA of 2.7 or 2.8 or above. The high school attendance target is 90 to 94% or above. And then just a note that I think is really important. The research shows us that GPA and attendance are more accurate predictors of CCL readiness than test scores or other achievement metrics. So again, remember Higgins asked the question about accountability in terms of CCL readiness. The meta research tells us that these are the metrics to pay attention to. And if we're implementing well, with fidelity, we should see these metrics rise. And with that, our graduates are going to have more opportunities. Along with the board goal, we have interim goals designed to predict growth related to grad rate, GPA, and attendance. So we have 3 interim goals that we're recommending. The first one is based on track graduation data. So at the end of each school year, our students will have accumulated credits. To meet on-track status, you can only have 1 F, no more, at the end of a school year. So if you hit 2 Fs, you're now considered off track toward graduation. and you're playing catch up the rest of the way. This is really valuable information that we need to pay close attention to. So this interim goal is going to require us to make sure that you're aware, that all of us are aware of how many 9th graders are on track or off track, 10th graders, 11th graders, and so on. If we're paying attention to those metrics, we should see a graduation rate rise. Interim goal 3.2 is related, of course, to attendance. Post-COVID, our 90% and above attendance rate is at 51.6. It's down about 25% since pre-COVID. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. We've got a lot of work to do in this area. And I would say as I'm doing work with the high school principals now, every one of them has identified attendance as their key area of focus this year. And we're all pleased with that. We all appreciate how much work that's gonna take. Interim goal 3.3 related to GPA. Currently 53.6 of our high school students have a GPA of 2.7 or above. We want to raise that to 70%. And a note about that, the others are 90%. GPA of 2.7, I would just point out, is much, much higher than the state requires, right? To pass a class, you essentially need a D, which is a 1.0. So we're setting a high standard for the vast majority of our students, also recognizing that college and college readiness is not the only option for our students, right? CCL, Life Ready, should be attainable by all students, whether they're college or career bound. And then as noted, you guys have a link to the research that I've referenced here and is the basis for the metrics we've selected.
Thank you so much. Member Lessons, questions?
Really a comment. I want to applaud you all for the serious thought that clearly you are all engaging with this goal, which has always seemed a little bit lofty and weird to me, that we haven't really pinned it down. It's a very slippery thing. And I feel like what you have here is a vision that's transparent, that really shows the importance of Anchorage's capabilities and values and visions, and Godspeed is the the word that
all of us.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Member Lessons. I absolutely agree. Member Holloman.
I think this probably falls outside the scope of what you're doing, but maybe not. Do we have any metrics on how our students do 3, 4, 5 years after they've left ASD? And I do understand that's hard data to get. But
yeah,
what kind of keyed it in my mind when you talk about how certain metrics like GPA and attendance mean more than test scores? That's the thing we're always getting hammered with, is test scores. And I think some people have ulterior motives in using that, the ability to actually talk about what percentage of our students are doing certain kinds of things several years after they've left us, I think would be powerful for us in talking to the legislature and talking to the public. But to my knowledge, nobody does that. I don't know if there are other districts in the country that do.
We do have access to the National Clearinghouse data. What's tricky about National Clearinghouse data is that we can only track students who enroll in a post-secondary institution after us. So while it gives us a picture of how they're doing, it's not every student. And in order for us to get the other kind of half of the data, if you will, would take a lot of us tracking graduates down and doing a lot of individual phone calls and things like that. So we do have that National Clearinghouse data, but it is a little bit tricky to track everyone. So.
I'm sorry, Member Holloman, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. I thought I heard somewhere that, so maybe it's just the clearinghouse data. I think during our retreat, think Emily shared with us some of that clearinghouse data.
Yes, she did.
But that data would not apply only to Anchorage.
Not all of it. It does. It tracks everybody nationwide.
Okay.
So, but we would be able to track our own individual students as well.
Oh, okay.
So, and we actually get those reports now. So that might be something that we talk about at a future board work session if the board would like to see it.
That'll be great.
I would like for us to see that. I realize we're just looking at the Anchorage students that went on to college, but it would be interesting to know those numbers as well.
Yeah, and it tracks 2-year degrees as well, so associate's degrees. So as long as they're enrolled in a post-secondary institution, then it'll track them.
Okay. Member Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the information. I like the goals. We talked about student attendance closing out last year, and I thought it was exciting. We were planning to address it, but we kind of got stuck on the how. And I think we mentioned last year that due to staffing challenges that we had trouble following through on our normal processes for following up with students who had truancy issues and kind of doing that legwork. I'm curious what's different this year, maybe why we're confident that we have an ability as a district to impact interim goal 3.2. I mean, there's a ton of different avenues there. I mean, there's an avenue of mental health supports. There's an avenue of over at least reviewing and updating our student discipline. A lot of follow-up questions on that, but I guess my question for now boils down to what makes us confident we have the resources and the community buy-in to impact 3.2.
If I could chime in first, because I asked the same question, and I think the exciting thing about this is if we adopt these goals, I've asked the team, we need to make this the main thing. So that means whatever excuses or lack of resources that we're hearing out in the world, we need to take bold action and address it, whether it's more resources, whether it's taking stuff offline, whether it's working with the community. We really got to make kids being in school the main thing. And I think as an organization, because it wasn't a goal, it wasn't a main thing as much as other things. Mm-hmm. So I think this is an exciting opportunity, but attendance is one of the biggest challenges for urban districts nationwide. So it is ambitious, but I told the team, don't put this out there unless we're ready to report out dozens of strategies for how we're going to tackle attendance.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I follow up?
Follow up?
We're nearing 5 o'clock, and so I don't know. I guess we've got time or not. There's
is there any objection to going about 10 minutes over? Seeing, hearing none.
Okay.
We'll do Member Jacobs and then Member Higgins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So I appreciate that. I guess I'll focus my follow-up on process. Is this coming before us as an action item at a future meeting that we'll vote on formally? Will this become adopted after today's work session? What is the process about what does the next steps look like on this? And then as I guess I'm doubling back to the CCL work for just a second. Will we be getting or if we're not, I guess I would ask when we have our goals and goal report outs and monitoring sessions, we have kind of a color-coded implementation guideline graphic. Having one of those for the academy work would be really helpful because I think the roadmap is great, but seeing where progress is would be super helpful. But so that's kind of an idea. And then the question, I guess, is what do next steps look like on adopting these formally? Thank you.
So the goal, the CCL goal as presented today is recommended. So we will have it at our work session, not work session, our planning session, our goal planning session on the 16th. And we will be able to talk about it more. And at that time, decide, put it forward for approval, not just that one, but hopefully all three. And then Member Higgins, did you have a real quick question?
Yeah, I'll go pretty fast. First of all, I appreciate the discussion. I feel like we're looking behind the curtain on what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I like that a lot. The attendance issue reminds me a little bit of other type issues when we've got 18% rise in hospitalization with COVID the last period of time and going crazy with that, that's going to be real difficult without having some type of program that allows continuation at home when you're sick or something like that. It seems like that is that I don't know if that's going to factor into it. I hope it does at some point, that we recognize that we can't control that and giving credit. I remember in 2008, we made high goals on graduation. Teachers were being pushed, find a way to help kids succeed to pass the class. They felt like that was inappropriate. I was applauding it. So it's okay. I like that approach, and I like the approach right now. On the CTE, I'll just make one comment. At the National School Board Association, when we got into the AI discussions, it talked about where schools might be heading and talked about low-level skills or these skills. All CTE was a big factor there, and promoting that and keeping that in place and growing that. I just applaud that because that's I think is true with the national information we get, and it just makes common sense. It's critical needs, and I'm just real pleased with that comment. So thank you.
Okay. Not seeing any more hands. Thank you guys. This has been great, and I'm sure this won't be our last time. But good work, impressive and transformative. I mean, really. And thank you for the proposed goal and the new way. It's not even new. It just makes sense to measure in the ways that you recommend. Okay, so move to adjourn to executive session.
Madam President, I move to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of legal updates, negotiations, and contracts.
Second.
Moved in second to adjourn into executive session. Seeing, hearing no opposition, we are moving into executive session. Thank you, guys.
Recording stop.